freelance writer, and I'd love to present the director, Rachel Lambert, and the stars, Daisy Ridley and Daisy. So, Rachel, how did this project come to you?
Very simply. My producer, Alex Sachs, sent it to me in November 2020, and I read it, and I loved it, and the first conversation we had, I said, I know who should play Fran. Daisy Ridley. And we got it to her shortly thereafter, and the rest is history, I guess.
Why was it something that you were drawn to?
That's a good question. I mean, so November 2020, right? We didn't even have vaccines out yet, and here is a film that was paying very close attention, and this attention then develops from looking at the minutia of life, of making coffee, having small talk, making your food, how you spend time, which of course I was so occupied by, as we all were for months, and figuring out how to define that for ourselves, what makes meaning out of this time, especially when we're absent of the normal things that make meaning. And here was a film that was examining that and ultimately celebrating it, even though it begins from a lens of maybe being suspicious of it or judgmental of it from Fran's point of view, or at the very least there's a conflict, there's a tension with her relationship to it. And then by the end of it, it's a celebration. And I thought, okay, it's connecting to me in my life. I'm sure it's connecting to other people. And then there was other things as well. Just I really responded to Fran herself, this incredibly funny, complicated individual. And I loved, from a technical standpoint, that it was a first-person narrative, and that is rarely seen with women. I'm sure there's a list that exists somewhere. I can't even call it up in my mind. It's usually a space of cinema that's reserved for men. And I saw the opportunity to make a film that thinks and feels like this woman, where we learn through the beginning of it, or at least this was the plan I built for it, we learn to think and feel like her. So all those things together.
Daisy, how did you feel when you first read the script?
What she said. I loved it. I'm very just drawn to story, and I love the story, and I had wanted to work with Rachel for a while, and it was one of those things that oftentimes these films take a really long time to get made, and it was just great timing. Like, I read it early in the year, we were like, this is how we're going to do it, this is when we're going to do it, and it just happened in that way. It was so simple in its way. Yeah, it was wonderful.
Yeah, and it was your first time producing.
Yes.
How was that?
Well, Rachel will tell me off if I if I say I didn't do much.
Listening.
I came on initially as an actor, and then Alex was like, I'm going to bring you in as a producer, and it was a generous give, but there was, an element of we had to like hold hands and say, this is how we're going to make the thing, this is how we have to like facilitate the film. And I was consulted on creative things, but Rachel made that very easy, because I was like, great, this is where we're going to film. Great. This is what we've got. Great. Like, everything was just great. And the minute I touched down in Portland, there was no decision making. I just got to be an actor and have a great time. And yeah, so
there were a couple decisions.
I can't even think of one.
But we were very calculated about when we would put that in front of you in order to preserve your mind. Yep.
Well, it's sort of crazy to me that, Dave, this is your first role in a film. Considering when you read the script, what did you think?
What Daisy said.
You guys.
I think it was, I read it twice within like the same week, and the story was beautiful. I've connected with Fran's character. I've had thoughts like that. I think people like exploring death as well. People get weird about it. And like, I just thought the sequences of like thinking about suicide, like it just weirds people out, so they were talking about it. Then wanted to work with Daisy, and then Zooming with Rachel. I felt we connected and we were laughing. I was like, this should be fun. And then my agents were like, you should do this too.
Well, that's like a perfect segue because I think the scenes where Fran is thinking about death are so beautiful and they're just so gorgeously directed and they look just sumptuous. What was it like kind of filming those and putting those together?
In what respect?
I mean, they're just beautiful. Like,
Oh,
you know,
thanks.
yeah.
Gee.
Seems like you're good at your job.
Oh my God, I wish my mom were here. She's not. But nevertheless. Well, I guess the things I could say about it is something that was very clear early on. I thought that I could anticipate the visions because they were left very open. The script was written in such an invitational way because the writers are all theater background. And the script read like a play in some ways, not in terms of like what the content of the piece was, but more the perspective of the writing, which was, I'd say, oh, I see just dialogue and the scene begins with they're in a room. And I'd be like, okay, what do they do for a living? I don't know, what do they do? You're the director. And I thought that was great. You know, they wanted me to have a point of view. And they brought me in on that level. And the visions were written with a similar level of invitation. Obviously, I understood they had to exist in a unified way, in a way that had very specific meaning and would operate in a very specific way. And I thought very arrogantly, oh, I can predict that. And I can plan it, because I love a plan. But then very quickly in prep, it was clear to me and Dustin, my DP, that we were going to have to surrender to the space and surrender to the location, surrender to the person that Daisy was going to build, because it had to, like, I couldn't predict, and that's something I would say a lot, like, we can't predict what Daisy's going to build. We have to receive it and keep paying attention to that, as well as what we paid attention to in terms of the town, and the tone and the space. So a lot of those visions we had to discover in real time.
Yeah.
The only one that we didn't was the crane at the beginning. That one we knew, we could plan that a little bit because we knew where they were working, and we knew that had to sort of set up a language. But from there it was, okay, what are some of the motifs and some of the ideas that are not only coming forward in Daisy's performance, but we're picking up in terms of the nature that's presented to us there. So all the spaces in which we shot were these spaces that were so unique and native to that area, and using ideas and imagery that felt born out of what we were watching Daisy do every day.
I mean, I love that because it does like really translate into the film. You know, Daisy, what was it like for you building Fran in that way and having, like, it sounds like a lot of freedom, and I'm sure conversations with Rachel on what this character became.
It's strange because I am quite far away from Fran, but she did feel very familiar to me, and it didn't feel difficult to understand her. We had talked a lot before we started shooting, and actually there was voiceover in the whole film that we had discussed, me just treating like stage directions. So I had like such a clear view of who Fran was. Like I had a running dialogue in my head the whole time. And then there was just a lot of room to try things, and physically I felt like she was someone that did not take up a lot of space and trod lightly on this earth and did not want to be noticed. And but also it was fun because Fran is not having a bad time. Like Fran likes her life, she likes the mundanity in a way of what her life feels like. She likes that. Like, so it was fun. And even though I was separate from the people in the office slightly, like it was so enjoyable to be around everyone. It was wonderful, and because I do not say too much in the film, I know what I was thinking, but it's been like an amazing experience because people take her very differently. Like the response has been quite different from person to person, which is quite wonderful because in that way people are revealing something about themselves too. Yeah.
Well, that's so interesting because one of the things I was really curious about is obviously people know you as like action, you know, but like I think there's so much interesting physicality to the role of Fran, and I was wondering if there's something, if that was something you guys discussed or something that you're thinking of purposely, like there's these like twitches and there's just like all these little like physical moments with her that almost like speak about who she is as a character when she's you know, pretty quiet for the most part.
I thought about the walk. I thought, I'm gonna do a walk for this. I really planned.
Did I ever tell you that Dustin and I wanted that very thing?
Really?
Yeah, no, like 1 or 2 days before we shot, we were picking up Thai food. And Dustin was, I wonder how Fran walks.
Oh my gosh, amazing.
So then like, but our first thing that we shot, you walked into a room, and then we're like, yeah, we'll just do another one, just, you know, safety. Daisy walks off, and then me and Dustin look at each other, and we're like,
I had a walk.
Full Muppet time, and then we're like, gotta keep it cool for Daisy when she walks back in.
Yeah, so I had a walk. And otherwise, no. I mean, the body, I felt like hands in pockets and things like that. But everything else was thoughts, I guess, translated into physicality.
Yeah.
Well, Daisy and Dave, how was it creating the relationship? Because like obviously the Fran and Robert relationship is such a crux to the film, and especially that last scene, which is just so like heart-wrenching. How was it creating that relationship?
Hard.
It was tough.
Yeah,
lot
it
of
seems like you
days.
guys are feuding right now.
I don't know, I think I'm weird. That might have helped. I'm awkward, I guess. That's about it. I don't know.
How about you were
Enriching.
authentically yourself
I
and
was
invited
myself.
others to
Yeah.
be authentically themselves?
I was myself. I was super nervous. Yeah, I think it just kind of developed organically. You know?
Yeah. I mean, it would have been difficult if we didn't get on.
I think I told her too much information about like having coffee at laundromats. Like I was just giving too much information, so I assume you're like, oh, okay, this guy's messed up. So you talk to him, I guess. I think you did say, how have you made it this far? Like, which I thought
Oh my god!
But it wasn't.
I did.
You did.
I was like, he didn't know how to recycle. Like reuse bags.
There's
Oh my
stuff
God.
I actually did want to tell you though. Is since I met you, I have now washed my bed sheets twice a month.
How many times did you say it?
Twice a
Once, I
month.
was doing once and then you got weirded out, and I remember going back to the Airbnb going, I called a friend actually, and I was like, yo, you think it's weird that I wash once a month? He goes, what? He goes, I do that too, I guess. I was like, man, I have a bad friend. I want to thank you.
Oh.
Well,
This is what sounds like.
well, I think this is a good like segue, and you obviously have so many funny people in this movie.
Yeah.
Meg Stalter, oh my god, I can't, a queen. How much improv was in all of this?
Quite a bit. We played around quite a bit. I think we had such a strong script to work from, right? So it gave us this, we knew we could rely on it. We knew that we would always have that skeleton. So it afforded us the opportunity to play and find then the life that would live around and within it and fill in with muscle and tissue around that skeleton. And that felt like such an exciting discovery to get to do with everybody. And I looked forward to those opportunities all the time. But it also afforded the opportunity for them to build a company and an ensemble and see that grow over the time we were together. So there was the isolated gains of like the scene work, but then also watching this ensemble just gel and become just fused was a thrill.
Yeah, were there any like improv things that like stand out that were really like great, or that ended up in the film or didn't?
Oh, there's so many. I mean, like Jeb.
So good.
So good. With the from the beginning with the cruise ship. Man, oh man, he's great. So much in the conference room.
The whole way up the hill.
Oh, the whole way up the hill, like
All that.
yeah, and then of course Daisy over here with like the killer final line of "I don't use an umbrella." Just delivers it like perfect, just as she's gracing the camera. And I was just like, dang, ooh, she good. And it was like all the way through, but then like little bits, like the little bit at the end of the diner scene, just like them, just him with the little bit on his beard, and just these little bits of life. But I think because we made a company people felt like there wasn't like a little jumping off point to become the improv version of their character. Their character existed kind of in and around all moments that were either scripted or even just prep or improv. And so I think everyone just had a lot of space, and it didn't feel like they were sneaking something in when it was an improv. It felt very like of a piece of everything that everyone was doing.
Yeah. I'm guessing that made the whole like murder game super fun to shoot.
That was actually highly scripted.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because we only had like 2 nights in that boat.
Okay.
Those were murder nights. Like, I remember rolling up to that houseboat and me and Justin just sat in the car and we were like, okay, we are gonna do this. And it was like we were going to war because we knew that we were like, we have to nail this because we have these artists, right, showing up, giving of themselves, overnight shooting, so little time because how much time we could be on the boat, and there was so much story to cover. So we had to really, the only time we could play is when we did like people running like through, and I'd be like, run to the right! You hit your knee, or I don't know, you'd be like, go in there, run over there. So there would be like these moments where they could play and like show off little weird ideas of being a kid playing a game, but otherwise it was highly scripted. Which is, I mean, just speaks again to the ensemble of like, you know, at any point, we need to do something that was, or like the final scene, like it had where it's like razor sharp scene work, they're there. And then the next scene, the next moment, you could say, okay, now we're gonna play, and then the same company of people could just fill that in. It was, I don't know, I'm so spoiled. I was like, what else can you do? Make another movie right now.
Well, I mean, I think that the scene, obviously, between you guys in the car is just so beautiful and terrible and just like so many things. How was that shooting? How was that working with that together? You know, that like line, obviously, like, it's no wonder you can't stay married. It's just like, what?
That was my hardest thing to film. It was the last thing we shot, and it was really the time I said to Rachel, like, it's like a struggle to get there because it's such a transgression.
Yeah.
To say something like that to someone is like, you can't take that back.
Yeah.
And I was like panicking because I had to get to a certain place and it had to feel earned. So actually I was like, Dave, you're gonna need to just keep going at me because it felt like I had to be more worked up. And I think it's that interesting thing of like the dinner is comfortable enough, and then it's just, it always felt to me like the line of her going, oh, it must have been strange growing up on the quiet side, something in there. Like that was like, suddenly this is too much, like this is, people are making assumptions and this is, so I just had to be a little more worked up. But I remember like having like a bit of a panic and thinking, and then like the heaviness of the shame, like when we got there and I actually said the thing, I would like felt sick, like saying that was, oof.
I mean, I went to therapy. Not for real. No, I go to therapy not for that. But I was nervous, but I think you helped me, I think, throughout the process. So I think by the time I got there, just like, you know, just being so experienced and being a great actor, it just kind of made me comfortable. But I was super nervous as well. I think. But it was sad. Because I got shitted on, you know.
Well, I love the scene right after, Rachel, and I'd love to ask you a little bit about that because it like really encapsulates without anything what Fran's feeling, and I think it feels very universal, like in terms of like panic attack, saying something you've regretted, you know, and it's claustrophobic in the way that you shot it, where it's just like really like focusing on Fran, like just laying on the floor, and it's like, who hasn't just been there looking at their ceiling, regretting everything they've just done, you know? Like,
An extremist, right? She doesn't get off the floor for like.
yeah, exactly. You know, what was it like shooting that? And just like, I mean, I think it's just such a perfect like kind of encapsulation of to go from that fight.
For me, it was, you know, it was just me receiving and capturing and paying attention. I mean, the person who did all the work was her. So.
It's interesting because I do think, like, of all the sets I've been on that are respectful and wonderful, I had never been on such a quiet set in between times. And there was like the whole thing of coming in and I like came down the corridor, and so there was some preamble I had. It was honestly the most silent set. It was amazing. And like, look, it was a small crew anyway, but it was so respectful, and I feel like, well, what Rachel did in the whole thing anyway, like everything was so like tangible. The office felt real and lived in, like every place we were felt real, and everything was facilitated towards us in like such an amazing way. And that was just another example of that, of like a conversation and then a quiet sort of chats in between times, and yeah, so I was just like, wow, this is like, it was sad, of course, but at the end of that evening I was like, wow, like what an amazing team.
Yes.
And that really was
Yes.
facilitated by Rachel.
Thank you. I'm very proud of things like that. Thank you very much for saying that. Yeah, it's, you know, you're not put, it's something you cultivate, and there's a level of care, and, you know, you just create an environment that's my responsibility, you know. It's how you know, you're trying to get the best out of artists, and that includes the crew, right? And their ability to make choices. And you just have to set that, you know, you're not directing on set, you're directing for the moment you say you're gonna make a film. So every decision you make, every email, every conversation, every call, every way in which you talk, every way that you might, you know, you navigate conversations, everything is directing.
Yeah.
And then it allows you to come to a moment like that and sit your crew down in the morning and say, me and Dustin get there 2 or 3 hours for everybody else, as we normally do. We know what we're doing, we set our tone, da-da-da. He lights his incense. And then Daisy comes in, we have a conversation. I learn where she's at, and then I relay where I'm getting from where she's at and what she needs, and take that to Dustin, so that either he himself or me with him will then communicate that to everybody separate, so we know what we need to be giving the space. And it was just very clear, and then, you know, people know what they're there to do, which is to make sure we get something that can go on screen.
Well, and you certainly did, obviously. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us today. Now everyone knows, thank you so much.